Severe drought, low rain totals, extreme heat. Every fire season has a unique set of weather conditions. Hello, I'm Chief Meteorologist Natasha Stenbach. All of us on the KOIN 6 weather team are watching out for you, monitoring rainfall trends, drought conditions, and working closely with fire weather specialists to get you through this summer safely. What kind of fire season are we up against this year? The National Interagency Fire Center is calling for a combination of normal to above normal significant wildland fire potential to start the season. That risk increases as we go deeper into summer.
The long-range forecasts continue to indicate July and August are going to be hotter than typical, possibly drier than typical for Oregon and Washington, and therefore we're going to still maintain that much of the geographic area, Oregon and Washington, is at risk for large costly fires, particularly Central Oregon, Central Washington, and Southwest Oregon seem to be at the most risk.
Once again, we're faced with below normal rainfall for the year. Meteorologist Kelly Barron shows us how the latest drought conditions will influence wildland fires now and in the future.
Oregon's drought has continued to worsen through the course of spring. In fact, every month since October of last year, aside from January and June of this year, has brought below normal rainfall to our region. And at this point in our summer, about 90% of Oregon is in a drought, which has set the stage for an above normal wildfire season across Washington and Oregon. And it's in those extreme drought-stricken areas that fire experts are concerned about wildfires taking off. And right now, we're closely watching the regions of Southwest and North Central Oregon as hotspots for wildfires to spread rapidly.
The Northwest Interagency Coordination Center in Portland works closely with local firefighters and the National Weather Service to forecast and respond to wildfires across Oregon and Washington. John Saltenberger, the current Fire Weather Program Manager, details how drought is just one aspect in determining fire weather, and that the daily weather conditions of our forested areas are the most important things to monitor on a day-to-day basis.
So one of the first things I like to do is look at the drought monitor just to get a feel for which geographic areas are under the most drought stress. And the Northwest has been one of those. And that drought stress area has been expanding week by week. And we have 72 key fire danger reporting points spread across Oregon and Washington. And on a daily basis, they're reporting how much precipitation fell, how much evaporation occurred, what the winds, the temperatures, the humidities, and sunlight were, and they add all that up. And day by day, they make an estimate of the volatility of forest fuels, such as dead logs, dead branches, dead twigs, living vegetation. The National Fire Danger Rating System is looking at the input of precipitation versus the outgo of evaporation and summing them up.
Looking at previous wildfires within the Pacific Northwest, roughly 50% of them are caused naturally by lightning. And 50% of them are caused by humans, whether that's from an abandoned campfire or an escaped prescribed burn. But of the larger and more serious wildfires on record, the majority of them happen in areas that are hard for firefighters to reach quickly.
When you look at the fires in the Pacific Northwest that become large and costly, more of them come from lightning than from humans. And the reason for that, I believe that the reason for that is that human-caused fires tend to occur near communities, near roads, near trails, where firefighters can get there pretty fast to extinguish a fire, a human-caused fire. That's not always true, but it's often true. Whereas lightning can hit anywhere. It can hit up in the high country, it can hit in steep terrain, it can hit miles from the nearest road. And therefore, lightning-started fires tend to have more incubation time before firefighters can get there to suppress that fire.
We're in a pattern of drought. Well, what now? Well, there's a river in the sky that can bring us multiple inches of rain in a matter of just days. It's called an atmospheric river. And it usually presents in the fall and winter and sometimes in the spring. It's like having thousands of swimming pools loaded up on a conveyor belt stretching all the way from the tropics up to our front door. Take a look at the flight I joined last winter as scientists dropped specialized instruments into the heart of an atmospheric river. So this is the GPS drops on. This is going out hundreds of miles over the ocean, far from home, but this is going to give us valuable weather data that you couldn't get any other way.
You think of the Pacific Ocean where our weather is coming from. It's It's a large, expansive region, and we really don't have any other observations other than from satellites that can tell us about where this weather system currently is, how it's evolving.
Resident 2951.
Reconnaissance flights like this, led by the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, UC San Diego, help make more precise forecasts. Oregon saw the most atmospheric river conditions in 2019 and the highest number of categorically strong AR events compared to the rest of the West Coast. You may recall this scene. February 4th through 8th, an atmospheric river triggered snowmelt, pushed Umatilla River over its banks and flooded portions of I-84 in eastern Oregon. Western Washington and northwest Oregon measured 5 to 10 inches of rain and up to 3 feet of snow over the Washington Cascades. How do these events change the course of future fire seasons? Well, the short answer is there is no clear-cut answer. You'd have to closely examine flammable vegetation, overall drought, and heat.
And that's known as fuel loading, which is to say that if you get a wet spring, you get a lot of plant growth. Grasses, shrubs will grow, and then inevitably, or almost inevitably, they're going to dry out in summer, and therefore you have an extra mass of burnable material that's available for combustion. The other part of the equation is, do you get the ignition sources? You can have plenty of material, but if you don't get sufficient ignitions, you don't necessarily have a busy fire season. So it's a complicated equation of looking at the amount of material, how dry it gets, what the weather is like.
What makes this fire season especially challenging are the hazards associated with wildfire smoke in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's go to meteorologist Joseph James. He explains why firefighting efforts will look very different this year.
Putting out a wildfire is laborious. It takes determination and it takes teamwork through tough hours for wildland firefighters. It's that teamwork, though, that leads to success. But the thing is, those firefighters have to be together with each other. Well, with the coronavirus, it's going to take a little more work. For 2020, it's going to feel different. For all, wildfire smoke now is more of a concern. This is how Oregon and Washington organizations are going to tackle the wildfire season during this pandemic.
The best defense during a wildfire season is to just not have any fires. But some years they are inevitable. But now it's not just wildfires.
Prevention piece, is the best way that we can deal with it.
Oregon State Fire Marshal Jim Walker is actually talking about the coronavirus. How will firefighters who work elbow to elbow still do their job safely? Walker says they'll configure fire camps. Daily screens will be available. Camp life will exercise social distancing. They'll have a health liaison present, and they'll be collaborating with the county and state health officials. All part of what you can find in the Wildland Fire Response Plan, a plan that organizations across the Pacific Northwest will all follow. A plan that also discusses the concern for wildfire smoke. The summer can come with hot, dry winds off the mountains, leading to blowing smoke.
We get to this coronavirus, and what we find is that smoke may have a negative impact on folks when burning occurs.
Exposure to air pollutants is what Walker is hoping to prevent.
We'll have smoke monitors out this year, primarily, for the sake of the community. But in this case, we'll also be looking at it in the safety of the firefighters.
And just like it takes teamwork to put out a fire, it's going to take all of us to help get through this wildfire season.
So what can you do to prevent wildfires this season? Well, the number one thing is to be careful with campfires in the woods and to fully extinguish them when you're packing out your campsite. Also, be aware of hot, dry, and windy weather. Wildfire conditions from humans or lightning, plus critical weather conditions, is the recipe for the next wildfire to erupt.
Thanks for joining us. Stay safe this fire season, and remember, our weather team is always here watching out for you year-round. Get future fire updates by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and on KOIN.com/weather.